The following video contains spoilers. We suggest watching the episodes alone in the dark.
Damn, even in my own mind I can't escape him. I miss Cat. Anyways, there was a poll recently on the channel about what should be reviewed for the 1500 subscriber mark, and it was chosen to be The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. And what better way to review a tale with a werewolf than to have me, Wolf, do it? So, let's get started.
Hello, I'm R.L. Stine. I write the Goosebumps books.
And this is a review done by my favorite YouTube channel, Wolf Entertainment. Now, I should probably mention that I haven't read the book at all, so I can't give you any comparisons to the source material. Instead, I'm just going to look at this as if it's an enjoyable tale on its own, or not. However, I know Kat kinda wants me to point this out, but our main character is played by Brendan Fletcher, who was not only on CW's Arrow as Stanley Dover, but was also on R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour as Seamus from Lots of Luck. Yep, a kid from Goosebumps came back for an R.L. Stine tale as an adult. We open up in a foggy swamp and run-down house by it. The mother tries to be optimistic about it while the main kid, Grady Tucker, is complaining and seeing the bad stuff about it. His sister, Kelly, finds a snake in the medicine cabinet. The dad and mom have Grady take the snake out because it'll move the plot forward, and he gets lost almost immediately. So he starts to run in more random directions, because obviously that'll help you, and runs into the local swamp man. But enough of that, let's get back to the house. And he's back? Huh? What? Excuse me? But how in the hell did he get back to the house? Did the wandering bum turn out to be a nice guy and escort him safely back with haste? What happened? You can't just go, here's a mysterious old guy in the swamp, and cut to, now the kid is safely back home. The sister does bring it up, but says it happened yesterday? Meaning now it's a new day? I'm even more confused. What the hell happened with the bum? Where did he go? How did you get home? Did you two have a lovely conversation and become the best of friends off screen? If you want answers, too bad, because ew, a spider. The dad also has deer in some cages, probably for that experiment that was just mentioned. Thankfully, we do get some information about the bum from the dad, since he went to town for info, and it turns out that he's a hermit. So it's all good. Oh, and he lost his family and is just a little strange, but that's not important. Grady feels weird about the swamp, and the dad brings up the deer as a sort of connection between the two, since the deer aren't well acquainted with swamps yet, and are probably feeling weird being in a new environment as well. But the dumbest thing about this is what the dad says next.
Now your mom and I get to study how they're going to adapt, and believe me, they will, because it's just natural to adapt. Pretty soon, they're going to love it here.
That's not how evolution works, you moron. You're a scientist. You should know that not everything adapts to a new situation, and if it doesn't adapt, then it will die. So it's probably a high chance that these deer are just gonna die out here, and you'll realize maybe deer are better suited for forests and hills rather than a swamp. I don't care if he's using it for a metaphor for his son, it can turn out in a bad way still. And of course, being compared to a science experiment and research doesn't make Grady feel all too happy. Now, we cut over to the night, where Grady is trying to get the television to work, while his parents are doing research, I presume. They're just on the computer over there. So he just goes upstairs while mysterious music and sound effects kick in. And once again, we just jump a day ahead, to where Grady is throwing a ball against the house. But then we get to meet a new character, the neighbor boy, Will Blake. Then we get some thrilling dialogue about how Grady probably had friends where he came from, and that there aren't many kids around Fever Swamp. Oh, and Grady's parents don't believe in guns. Do they think wars are fought with sticks and stones still, or what? Will gives us ominous dialogue about the swamp, how some people go into the swamp and get lost, like it twists with your head or something, and that the old owner of the Grady home got lost in the swamp one day and hasn't come out. Despite that information, Will and Grady go into the swamp and we learn about the name of Fever Swamp. How people believe it gives people a fever that makes them go crazy and enter the swamp. Because of course a swamp has to have an urban legend of some form. A noise goes off and Will and Grady just run away from it, but come across the swamp hermit who has a crossbow with him. Now, do they A. continue to run away, B. get found out by him, or C. follow behind and watch him? If you guessed A, then you put too much faith in these two. Of course, they follow behind him despite him being armed and possibly not altogether mentally. Will tells Grady that the hermit is the reason why people disappear, despite the lack of evidence, and that he doesn't age a day because he keeps catching people and claims he's a werewolf. Thanks, Will, for putting that paranoia into Grady. Only good things can happen from this point. Grady brings up the stuff Will told him to his family, and of course they don't believe him. I don't get why Grady is treating Will's knowledge as some sort of Bible for info about Fever Swamp since he's just met him and had one adventure with him. That night, Grady wakes up in a sweat and tests himself for a fever, finding his temperature to be normal. However, a random dog breaks in and jumps Grady. Grady tries to convince his family to take the dog in, so now we have a dog in this story because of course R.L. Stine has a pet. Grady is already taking kindly to the dog and even takes him on his adventure with Will. We find the hermit's wolf bait, which keeps away werewolves. Somehow. I don't get it, since bait usually lures things closer to itself, not keep them away. Also, apparently werewolves were the creator of the silver bullet kills a werewolf myth, so that way they could kill poor people who believed in it since they were poor and couldn't buy silver bullets. Which honestly sounds like the dumbest thing I've ever heard, yet also most creative.
Werefolk? I suppose you'd call them werepersons. Thank political correctness. It's ruining the country.
I don't really get why this was a line, to be honest. Maybe to show country versus city divide in language, but whatever. Just throw away. Grady then trips over literally nothing and almost falls into the bog, which is apparently the heart of the swamp. The two geniuses of the swamp decide to see how deep the bog is, and Will finds Grady's shoe and pranks Grady by pretending to be grabbed by something. Grady and Will decide to race back with Vandal, and the sister finds a dead body on the property. This, of course, is used to get the audience and family starting to think that maybe Vandal killed it because the bite marks are canine. If we want to find out who really killed this rabbit, maybe Grady should hire Sunset Shimmer, certified detective, for this case. Because it's a swamp, they rule out that a wolf could do it because, quote, the swamp is too brutal. Which begs the question, why did you bring deer into a brutal area to see if they would survive or not? If it's brutal, you'd think that deer, one of the most innocent and timid creatures on the planet, would survive here. Let's get back to Will and Grady, because they're going to search for the hermit because they still think he's a werewolf, and obviously he's the one who killed the rabbit. The two idiots are looking for a possibly dangerous old man to prove a dog's innocence. I love how random Goosebumps can be. I honestly do. He chases them out of his property, and Grady gets caught by one of the many traps the old man has placed around the forest of the swamp, and Will runs off. The hermit takes him back into his humble abode, and Grady pleads and begs to be let go. As the full moon begins to rise, Grady cuts his way out of the netting while the hermit is howling to the wind and escapes back home. He tells his mother that the hermit is probably a werewolf and uses the unbelievability of such a creature existing to try to prove its existence. As night comes closer, one of their windows gets broken by one of the deer. Vandal is barking at something, and they find one of the deer killed with the fencing around it completely wrecked. Yet, somehow, despite seeing huge chunks of the wood missing and the fence curled back, the mother somehow believes that Vandal did this. That this average-sized dog that was just seen barking at nothing in sight ripped the fence open to kill a single deer. You can't be this dumb as a scientist, lady. So Grady decides to lock his mother in the barn, and he hears Will yell off in the distance. Yep, this family's a bunch of geniuses. Grady enters Will's home and finds a chair knocked over and the home torn apart. So Grady takes something from Will's house. I think it's a fire poker, it's kinda dark. And enters the swamp armed to look for Will. Meanwhile, his sister finds the werewolf in their home as it very choppily chases after her and tries to attack her and the mother in the little barn they have. The werewolf goes after Grady in the swamp, and the hermit's net catches the werewolf. Oh, and the hermit can speak now. The hermit gives us his backstory about how the werewolf killed his wife and children, so he's gonna get his revenge. But the werewolf breaks free and attacks the hermit, and then attacks Grady after. But the full moon begins to eclipse, and I guess that makes him revert to his normal form. That being Will Blake. Yep, Will is the werewolf this entire time, and also doesn't want to be one, so he tells Grady that he should run away as the eclipse begins to end and he loses control. But Vandal, best dog that he is, comes back to save Grady by pushing the werewolf into the bog, letting him drown. Kind of a dark ending. But we cut away to the future. I'm not sure when, just school is starting now, so it's probably the future. Where the dad still doesn't believe that werewolves exist, but at least doesn't believe Vandal killed the deer anymore. As the moon rises once more, a skull floats out of the bog water, and Grady howls back at the moon. So how was it? It wasn't that bad. The plot was kinda weird with having Vandal possibly being the reason why the deer died, the fake out with the hermit, the boy getting caught by the hermit, as well as the entire existence of the sister. Throughout this entire thing, the sister does not do much of anything outside complain, find the rabbit that gets everyone against Vandal, and gets attacked by the werewolf. All of this could have happened without her existence. The parents also seem too stupid despite being scientists. If the swamp is such a brutal place as I've brought up many times, what made them think that deer could survive there outside of the need to evolve? Not only that, but I still find it hard to believe that the mother could think a dog could rip out the wooden piece of the fence and part of the metal chain link fence just to kill one deer. However, I did find the acting to be decent. It's not bad, but not spectacular either. It's passable, and it doesn't have bad acting, but just a few weird lines here and there. It's also weird that the hermit doesn't speak when he has Grady in his house, but then does speak when he confronts the werewolf. The ending is also very dark, as both Will and the hermit are dead. We don't see or hear anything about them after it. The sets and the locations look pretty good as well, especially when it's at night. The werewolf's design is also good. It looks pretty scary, and if I was a child, I'd probably be scared of this thing. And it also does kind of resemble, I guess, what a real werewolf could look like. The makeup on Will when he's mid-transformation doesn't look as great. Plus, the sound of the werewolf is also pretty terrifying. If I had to score it, which of course I have to, I think I'm actually going to give this an 8 out of 10. I believe that's a silver skull or a gold skull, probably around the border of it, in Cat's sort of system. Definitely should go watch it if you're binging old Goosebumps and Haunting Hour stuff. Thanks for all the support from all 1,500 plus of you subscribers and viewers, as well as those down in the comments. Except for those who complain and want us to shut up because they don't know what a review is, apparently. If you haven't subscribed yet, but like this review, you should definitely consider subscribing and following this channel. I'm Wolf, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye!
Werefolk? I suppose you'd call them werepersons.